adjacent to that, this building here. Tandem parking, internal staircase to get you up to your units. Here's a breakdown of the parcels. So we might be referring to these later, or we might be referring to the building types. So there are, I believe, 4 building types, A, B, C, and D. Type A is the building type that is occupying parcels 1 through 4, and those are multifamily structures, 2 on each parcel, except for 4 only houses 1. Parcel 5 is the mixed-use building, and then parcel 6, which is building C and D for the townhomes, occupies that space. So jumping ahead a bit without looking at any of the elevations yet, hopefully those plans kind of translated into what we see expanded upwards here with this 3D rendering of what the site will look like. So again, we are looking at this corner retail spot on the corner here, and you can kind of see some of the driveway entrances to the buildings. But essentially, for the most part, 3-story structures, alley access provided to that entire strip that fronts off Broadway, and then the multifamily and townhome development on the opposite corner. I think there's one more view just from a different angle, so showing you kind of the backside of the alley, and where they're providing trash enclosures for all of those units, and some of the landscaping along the terrace side here. So, looking at first where you can provide some comments and suggestions to the applicant, the architecture and site design. So, character, quality, and scale of the design, architectural relationship with the site and other structures, building materials and colors, fencing, trash enclosures, and walkway improvements. And exterior lighting is included here, although there's a whole other lighting section. Signs and the screening of exterior appurtenances. So have these elements in mind as we go through the next handful of slides, which are primarily the elevations. So these are the materials and colors that we were given. Kind of a minimal palette in terms of colors being chosen, and on the left you can see these are all stucco finishes as options. Next column we're looking at composite wood siding, metal finishes, and then a couple of different balcony finishes, either wood finish and composite wood finish or metal railings. So this is kind of the palette that we're looking at for this project. And also some landscape/hardscape elements, other site amenities that might be provided and are required to be provided, like bike racks, some common area elements like coffee tables and seating nooks, and just more paving details, which are called out on the plans, definitely. So starting out with building A, which is parcels 1 through 4, and we're looking at 7 structures. So 7 of the 10 are building type A. These are the elevations that were provided. So we start at the bottom one. You can imagine on the other side is kind of mirrored of this, because another building A is facing this as you drive down the middle of the carport here, or driveway here, and access the carport either left or right. And then this is the building facade that is facing Broadway. So when we think about parcels 1 through 4, this pattern of having this building finished in these colors and materials, this building finished as it is, this repeats for parcels 1, 2, and 3, and then when we get to the 4, that's the only one that's not paired up with another in-kind building A type. Building B, which is the mixed-use building, similar color palette being used, similar elements in terms of balconies and the window treatments and some of the finishes. So there's a similar language being used again on Building B. Building C takes us across to the multifamily structure that is on the other side of the alley. So this is more closer to townhome development. And we see great change, definitely, in terms of accessing your parking here. And just more of the same elements, again, the color palette and the materials being used on Building C, which is parcel 6. Building D, the townhomes. This is the only building that actually has private enclosed garages for the people who will reside there. Exterior balconies on the 2nd level, and then entrances to which you can go either left or right into your unit. Jumping back into renderings real quick, this is a 3D view from Broadway, which shows the corner commercial space with potential examples of signage, monument sign, and kind of gives you a glimpse at the streetscape and the rhythm that is being created through the use of those structures. Also, the parking that is shown as street parking along Broadway. As we heard in the previous project, although this is in West Broadway Urban Village, street parking is definitely encouraged to be used to supplement what either you can't fit on your own site or which would make that streetscape more active and potentially safer. This is the 3D view off of Olympia showing the townhome development. Just a different perspective from what we saw before. You can a little bit more clearly see the separate entrance here, which is separated from the more major improved alleyway for the majority of the development by more than 50 feet. There's a view of that alley and these elements here, which I believe are at most of the entrances for the vehicles to navigate the site. So, before we move into landscaping, maybe we can digest that a bit and talk about what we've seen so far in terms of the last handful of slides, the elevations, the materials, the building types that are being proposed, and I might sit so you can have a conversation with each other. And let me know when you're ready to proceed.
All right, so are we gonna do this, go through this whole thing in this manner with you presenting and then we discussing this particular pieces and then the applicant gets to do any?
I'll let you decide. I have everything, I could go through everything right now, or we can do it per architecture, landscaping, and lighting as the code breaks it out, but also to have time in mind and how many comments we may have about each of those sections, because it is a large project and a lot of nuances to what we might be considering.
Okay. So.
I have a question. Is there a reason why you chose these colors, and were there any other options?
So that would be a question for the applicant, right?
Alright, so we can go through, have them complete it, or go through this piece, have the applicant give their spiel before we move on and section it off by like architecture or any other?
I definitely like to break out this piece, maybe if we wanna put lighting and landscaping together. Let's see if I'll start with that. No. But just depending on timing, but I definitely think we could give some feedback and maybe it's fresher in your minds. But
Yeah.
I don't know how everyone else feels.
So do you wanna just give feedback, or you wanna hear, from the design standpoint first, and before we do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know they had a thumb drive, so. Maybe get some of our questions answered.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Roscoe. I am one of the partners in the project. Audience, nice to see you. I've seen you since high school. It's been a while. Anyway, super excited about this project. And you know, the project is something that you owe kudos to Kurt as your advocate. We have the project, you know, envisioned for a different use, and he was a big advocate for infill housing. And all of a sudden, we started seeing the same vision that he did, which is pretty rewarding. The last time I was up here, I was talking about Seaside City Center over a decade ago. At which point in time, I was also on the West Broadway Urban Village Citizens Advisory Committee, and you guys made it happen, which is really cool. It's amazing what's happened down there, and to see that Catalyst project has actually catalyzed, you know, and participated in the, you know, renaissance for your little downtown is pretty exciting. So our goal is that this does the same thing for Upper Broadway. This will be the first infill housing project of this scale on the entire Monterey Peninsula during my lifetime. So kudos to you at 43. So it's been a long time since the Monterey Peninsula has been able to take advantage of, you know, underutilized properties like this. I think this will be, you know, certainly a head turner, and make a, you know, big statement as to where Seaside is going, taking what, you know, you're already doing on the West Broadway section of town, and carrying it up the hill, eventually into East Seaside. Speaking to the architecture, we took a bit of a chance in Sand City when we renovated the then Design Center, now Independent, and went with a much more modern architectural theme, trying to play off of some of the more urban contexts that we saw in parts of the Bay Area, or more dynamic places along the beach and parts of Southern California. And this kind of carries that same theme, going distinctly more urban, clean lines, clean geometries, intentionally avoiding anything that might date itself and get too busy. And as a developer, you realize that challenge is very difficult to build something new that doesn't look old in 20 years. And you know, the themes that we have returned to towards the goal of having something that, you know, won't be today's salmon building, if you will, you know, 30 years from now, is to look to colors that, with a slight hint of you know, drama and color, generally lean towards more muted earthen tones, and look to a design palette with materials that are similarly rooted in kind of the natural landscape, or in this case we've got, you know, glass, wood, some metal elements, and then you know, the stucco panels that are painted tones that effectively will still communicate a sense of newness and nowness without offending folks, because we painted the building a bright color or went the wrong direction relative to setting a precedent that is universally appealing. The orientation of the buildings is something that doesn't necessarily come out in, architecture and isn't imminently apparent to, boards like yourself or staff or, new onlookers. But this is version 33 of the site plan. We poured over this site plan trying to balance unit counts, the avoidance of being required to put in elevators for a different building type in order to keep the costs down and keep the user experience, comfortable, not having to climb more than two sets of stairs to get to people's units. We spent a lot of time thinking about lines of sight into the project and from within the project in order to create a sense of cohesiveness, so the project still felt like something that was unified versus to do what we did in the city center project, which attempted to create a city streetscape. This identifies itself as a unified project in much the same manner that many urban, multifamily projects do, so that residents feel a sense of ownership and identity that is unique to that project. So there are repeating elements as you go up and down the street. Those are by design, intentional. The unit orientation and typology effectively means sequencing of the way the units are laid out both inside and how they relate to the street also is standardized. And if you can imagine, if you build a large monolithic building that has 4 walls, and you get 100 units, or in the case of Independent for reference, that's 61 units on 3 floors. You're working with some of the same design elements to try and standardize those units in order to be able to afford higher end finishes, because what you save on standardization versus customization, you can spend on finishes, which are the things that people tend to relate to. So the building is quite efficient. Some of the things that we were keen to balance were maximizing light into different windows, maximizing privacy between the buildings, where the buildings, because of the density, are actually quite close to each other. So which windows look into which rooms even within the units. How those buildings look down on common spaces, whether it be a green space or a shared alley. How people's balconies, for example, are screened so that there's if someone wants to go out early in the morning and sit in their chonies, they can do so without worrying about privacy. So the elements, for example, in the top right hand corner are the screening elements we use for any interior facing balconies, whereas the element on the bottom right is more of an exterior balcony. So little details that involve a great deal of thought. The design team that we used for this project is the same one that has recently done the master planning for the west end of Sand City, where they just entitled several hundred houses. And they came to us out of the Bay Area. They are one of the preferred architects for several major development firms that are building literally thousands of units per year. And so, not having built many apartments, we went to actually an RFP with a variety of different architects to try and find someone that could assimilate some of the observations about what would be well received on the peninsula, but still bring it up a notch so that we were doing something that really raised the bar. I challenge that this will be the best looking new apartment project on the peninsula. Certainly better than anything that's happening on Lighthouse Avenue, for example. But it's in part due to the acute amount of thought that's gone into bringing something forward that we felt like we could have specific answers for when met with questions. and because these folks have done such a variety of different projects, from relatively low-lying projects like this to the big skyscrapers, and are able to draw from kind of best practices in order to, create an environment that looks good for the folks that don't live there, but actually is quite comfortable and convenient for the folks that do. So I'll talk for hours if you let me.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Alright,
Speak well.
And we can answer any questions that you have. Matt'll do the tough work.
I agree, it's quite a project, and I noticed the excellent use of space for the whole area. Seems like you guys fit a lot in there. And I noticed the Bay Area design pretty quickly too. Yes.
Me too. I think it's great that she's able to use that whole space and make something so
Good evening, Board. Matt Norman with the Roscoe Group. One thing I wanted to add, I mean, Patrick did a fantastic job covering a lot of design concepts, but we spent a lot of time on studying how we could minimize the auto impact and not have the automobile and parking as a major part of the development. So we purposely studied and looked at a number of typologies, and we came up and focused on tucked under parking. And so you'll see that really the parking is hidden and out of sight from the main development and pedestrian view, and we really did a number of elements in terms of the design to screen that, hide it from the public right of way, soften it, and so you just don't see a sea of asphalt. And where we do have auto course in between the buildings, what we're using is pavers to not only give you texture and scale, but also for stormwater, and also to kind of help for traffic control. It kind of slows traffic around and gives it that sense of scale and pedestrian, feeling that walking through there. So that was a major item. And then the placement and kind of our siding of the buildings. We have actually a challenging site because we have 30 feet from San Lucas to Terrace. And so you can't really just design a long linear building across. We had to look at designing the buildings perpendicular so that we could create shelves, if you will. And in between those shelves, what we do is we create our landscape open outdoor areas. And for us, the pedestrian experience and the neighborhood experience was very important. So as Patrick mentioned, we designed buildings that purposely have walk-up entrances. There are no elevators. There are no 1 hour rated, corridors to nowhere. That's no man's land. Everyone has a direct exterior outdoor entrance. We have created nodes, so when you come into that stair area, there's a node on the ground level that could be an outdoor barbecue picnic seating area, and then at each stair level as well, there's a small outdoor common area for gathering and community space. So I think those are our general design parameters to kind of create that pedestrian-friendly oriented development, and locating the commercial retail close to the post office area, kind of tying into the West Broadway corridor, and then as our residential moves up Broadway to the east, that starts to tie into more of the residential component as you go up Broadway. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I had just some general questions in regards to how the whole project goes together and why is it existing that there were those existing parcels, so they have to work with those existing boundaries, like you can't put a building over a property line, or is it like can't it be one entire parcel?
You can answer that, because you guys did all the lot line adjustments to get it where it's at right now.
Yeah. So it's good question. It's actually a funding strategy. This project benefits from the new opportunity zone concept that you may have learned a bit about, that prioritizes infill projects like this. The way those opportunity zone funds work, people essentially pool money as a tax sheltering mechanism. So it's easier theoretically for us to raise a little bit of money in order to fund these projects. But we've maintained that blocks of projects are on their own parcels, so that if there was an interest in different phasing of the project during construction because of funding, or different ownership structures, wherein, like a shopping center, you might have, common CC&Rs that integrate how the property functions, but different ownerships, so that folks can invest in one building and then invest in another with a different pool of money. They can have their own parcel. And that really, at the end of the day, is perception, because it functions as one, but from the standpoint of loans and lending and borrowing and so forth,
I
banks.
was wondering if that was the case, because then you could, like you said, if you're gonna phase it. However, some of those parcels have only 3 parking stalls, so how would you qualify a project on a particular parcel when it doesn't, it needs to be contextual to the whole piece in order to make it work with the regulations. So how does that apply?
Yeah, I think the parcels are either fully self-parked or super close. And if they're not close, the parking accommodating each building will be built concurrent with each building. It would be our assumption that that would be a condition of approval. Realistically, this will all be built at once, because it's much more cost effective to do so. And realistically, we will fund and improve all of the site work at once, because there's a fair amount of grading that needs to be done, the paving and so forth. So more than anything, it's driven by a what if. We haven't gone and fundraised for this yet, but maintaining that flexibility sometimes is important.
And we'll stay on the parking piece. Is there guest parking figured into the overall stall count?
There is, yeah. It's, I don't know what the specific number is, but it's, Matt, you can.
I mean, you had it pretty much broken down, but I didn't think I saw any guest parking identified.
Yes, so we are fully parked. We actually have more parking, because this is a transit-oriented development. 0.5 stalls per unit is what's required. We actually provide 1.37 stalls per unit. And I think that's appropriate, because some of the units are actually 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
So we have that, and that.
So 1.7 includes guest parking or without?
1.37.
1.37.
That includes guest parking.
Including guest
And
parking.
that does not include, though, the additional parking that we provide for the commercial component.
Yeah, it does.
And then that number also does not include, we counted on-street parking, which was something about, I think, in a total of 60 stalls on-street as well.
Oh, that includes on-street.
The 1.37 does not.
1.3 is all on-site parking
Oh,
for
okay,
residential.
okay, so
Correct.
yeah, so you would have outside.
And one thing to clarify too is the parcels, the way we've configured them, they do allow so that each parcel can self-park for that specific building. So we do. Yeah, if there's actually a diagram, we can pull that up, but we have a page before, and I think there was actually a diagram.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is fantastic. Which one is it?
There might
So
be
you-
one before that too.
So you can see right here, that's the red line, that's the parcel line, and that's another parcel line. So then we have tucked under parking here, tucked under parking here, and then parking on the alley. So all that parking meets the requirement, and exceeds for that.
Maybe it was the building on the far corner, because you have 12 on the ground for the commercial space, and you only have basically alley for the whole building. I think that was the one probably that didn't, but I could be wrong, so
Yeah.
that was just a question.
It actually highlights something that, we spent a fair amount of time on, is making sure that parking was actually proximate to each unit, so that it was well balanced. The idea that someone would have to walk half a block to get to their unit with a bag of groceries didn't work so well.
Although, yeah, hopefully this is a transit oriented, so you will, use Broadway and.
None of the parking stalls will be full because everyone will be on the bus.
Yeah, you leave your car there and transit to work. Yeah.
Probably for our kids that will be true, because there won't be cars,
Okay, so, that was
I like the look of the parking area in the alley too, that it's more pedestrian and landscape than car alley look. Lovely.
So the affordable units, what is your thinking on how it's going to be distributed?
We don't know yet. The honest answer is, we know that there's a bias towards distributing it, evenly throughout the project, kind of at random. But I don't know yet. The honest answer is I don't know where they'll go. I don't know if it'll affect my financing. We're open to suggestions, but ultimately, we haven't made that decision yet.
Are you required to have a unit of each type be, for the affordable?
Yeah, my understanding is it's evenly distributed between all unit types, so we provide 20% of the, I think it's 14 total units, and of those 14, the number you basically, you have one bedroom, two bedroom, three. Yeah.
Okay, it's respective of the amount that you
Right.
have that type, okay.
I think it's a minimum of one of each.
So the other questions I have had to do with entries and the perception of having to, if you're walking to your spot or someone's coming to your place, that you have to walk between the cars in the middle of the building and then go into a dark alleyway underneath to get to where you are. So I don't see too many visual clues where the entry points are, especially from the street. How would anybody know, other than you're in the orange building or that or a number? It's all the same, and how does one, I like the townhouses in the fact that it's obvious you're right up there, you enter. With this, I'm going between the cars, there's a little entryway somewhere that it's hard to read to get to where I don't see entry in there.
Yeah, that's, again, not unintentional. We have steered clear from gates or other, basically privacy and security mechanisms, so as not to send the wrong message about the living environment. But the entrances to each of the units are very close to the buildings and, intentionally discreet. Because, each of those buildings, essentially is designed to accommodate the residents first versus the public. The only primary, look at me, come here, portion of the project is in fact focused on the corner, which has a more expensive, a little bit more punchy elevation, because we do want people to enter at either of two entrances for purposes of getting in and taking advantage of the retail component on the corner. But I'm pleased to hear you say that, because that's kind of what we want, is that the residents know how to find it versus folks from the public.
Yeah, that's a clue to where you go, and then the other part is safety as
Right.
well. I get your point.
Right.
But visibility is a big thing, and to be underneath and in the middle of the cars to get, if you're on the first floor, I don't know. I don't have a level of comfort with that at all.
There will be, it's a very good point. Some of the most important aspects of the building are that, the police can drive by and look in. They can look down a variety of different, curb cuts and have visibility to the entirety of the building. That is a balancing of, those concerns like safety, and also just the aspect of trying to keep the people walking outside of the path of the car itself. The ability to light and control entrances with security cameras and daytime lighting, things like that, is arguably a little bit better next to the building. but certainly, you know, there will be a distinct, you know, attention to any security concerns. With a tuck under parking, people are inherently getting out of their car, close to the building, out of the rain, with groceries in their hand. So that does put a need for a place to walk in front of the car, between the car and the building. And we're, with the efficiency of the plan, double using that unused space as a pedestrian path in, you know, to either side of the building. But in general, we're not trying to encourage folks from basically using this as a cut through for pedestrians to kind of get to any other part of the town. So maybe it's an imperfect solution, but it's definitely balancing a variety of different things. Some of the things that we are doing relative to concerns about security are these little pockets. Matt, could you point to the landscape pockets that are only accessible so that those will have essentially little screening walls with bench seats that are only accessible from the interior on the shared common hallway. So if you have a key and can get into the hallway or are buzzed in, you can get in and hang out in the little protected areas. But we're intentionally not making those nodes that encourage outdoor, you know, use of an outdoor space accessible to folks that might walk up, or, you know, homeless that might decide that that's where they're going to sleep for the evening.
Okay, so that is another point. So you, in order to get to the circulation up above and to those outdoor spaces, there will be a security gate there
Yes.
somewhere
There will yes,
into that area.
correct.
Although you still have people that are just walk up to their apartments with nothing around them, just no security, so to speak. They just walk in. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dissimilar to walking into your house. I mean, there's arguably, because there are more people and it's more fluid, it's probably a little bit safer than a single family house that someone could kind of hang out, hide, and wait for you for a long
I
time.
don't know. You've got covered parking everywhere.
Pepper spray.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. We'll have misters of pepper spray that we can deploy at will.
Yeah, have them in this. Yeah. And
That's a concern.
okay, so those areas that are out there in the middle of between the two buildings, the outdoor area, that's all you have for the residents of that building as far as outdoor space
They have all.
on the
Actually,
ground?
Every unit above the first floor has its own balcony.
Right, but if you wanna barbecue, barbecuing on a balcony with wood rails, I don't think it's gonna be allowed, is it?
Barbecuing on a lower level when you've got two sides of windows that are 30 feet apart of each other is also problematic. And so the question came up, why don't you have rooftop decks? I really want rooftop decks.
Yeah,
Is
that
what you
sounds
said?
like a great idea.
Yeah. So, you know, there is a plan that has the rooftop decks. Whether or not we build those will be determined by how much rent we can charge and whether or not we can afford to embellish, you know, the public spaces that way. It would be pretty cool to have that up there. I certainly agree. A lot of it is just going to be, you know, how the marketing team that, you know, we sit down with and helps forecast, you know, what rents we can actually achieve based on, you know, what other folks are paying and other opportunities. There is we're hoping to be first, but as you're probably well aware, with, you know, the Kiwi project, there's a glut of housing that is going to hit the peninsula more or less in the same 5 years. And so we want to be sensitive to that and make sure that we don't, you know, overcommit. So while we have a plan, we intentionally held it back so it wasn't a requirement.
Don't charge for the view.
So,
We-
Seems to be the catch there.
Yeah, no.
yeah, so outdoor spaces, is there any ground
There,
areas that if you
Picnic
wanted
areas.
to pick, barbecue or
Yeah.
whatever,
Or
or
do we have barbecue areas?
is
Yeah,
that,
each
How
of
big
these
is that?
nodes has an area for, it's either depending on where you're on the site, you either have a built-in wall or you're above, on
Okay,
grade.
above grade.
is there
You
shared
have-
but
barbecue
it
there?
doesn't show barbecue in there, does it?
No, we wouldn't have a built-in, but you could have, that's area for a barbecue.
It's for
Meaning someone could bring down their-
recreational,
Yeah.
You can bring it down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
recreational.
And then you know that there is somebody's lower level, whatever, right there too, is there something on the ground floor for them, right adjacent to it?
We've designed these so that the private outdoor space is not immediately conflicting with those areas. It would be screened or on the opposite side of the wall of the building.
In other words, the ability of folks, encouraging a lot of folks to congregate right outside your bedroom, bathroom window on the first floor, makes that first floor significantly less pleasant. And a lot of these first floor units will be populated basically as granny units for folks that don't want to climb any stairs at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to be sympathetic to that. The topography of the site does limit the amount of utility in the outdoor spaces because most of the outdoor spaces are sloped.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a byproduct of trying to avoid, big retaining walls that, seesaw down the site, which are extremely expensive. But when you've got a terraced site, what a retaining wall also does is it makes, it significantly limits what you can do with the lower unit. So again, a balancing act. The spaces between the units mostly will be, green spaces with selective planting of trees in order to avoid, views from one room to the next into private spaces, versus let's hang out on the sloped lawn and, look at the ocean. I don't know that those spaces would be where you hang out. You walk to the park, basically.
So there's no pathways or anything through those areas, you just have to walk in the parking area?
There's a pathway of the interior side, the alleyway side, that in order to meet ADA does kind of zigzag through the park so folks don't have to use stairs.
Right.
But the grading and topography change for this level of density was a huge challenge for us, and one of the reasons why we ended up stepping the larger building in the northwest corner of the site, why it's a split level building. In direct answer to your question, are we encouraging folks to walk right through the greenscape? No, we are not.
Will you also maintain all the landscaping, or is that done when the building's up and running, the independent, you guys will just have maintaining the low drop or plants?
Yeah, this will be, I'm not a
Definitely
huge
not,
fan of the landscaping in our other project, but this will be much nicer in terms of landscaping, a lot more trees, a lot more verdant. And yeah, it'll be all maintained by common ownership. So the same folks that paint the building will be making sure that the grass doesn't go brown and stuff like that.
So it's not gonna be you would have the community and then you have the, maybe back up. It's not gonna be a association, is it, in different areas? Is it possibly because of the private owning? The association then would probably hire the contract to do the landscaping in each division part, but would it all be done and would it all be kept up because of that? That's one concern, because I've had landscaping in the past, that's my profession, I'm finished, but the problem was I do one area and the other 3 areas would be looking like crazy, and it's all association because this person doesn't put money into it. We have that now in the city of Seaside with homeowners, and it's stupid, and be damn if we're gonna have it downtown, like in the area that we're building. They're not even doing the homes here now, so that's a big concern to me, walking on the sidewalk that's not clean.
Yeah, that is a challenge in a condo project. This is,
Yes, it is.
there's no condo map proposed for this, so this is intended to be a for rent project, so a portion of everybody's rent will be paying for.
Good,
Those
because it
expenses.
gets ran down if you don't have some
Right.
kind of stability there. You
Exactly.
look like us. In 3 years, you want to sell. I'm speaking, I'm
Yep.
asking you a question. Thank you very much, young man. Appreciate it.
Any other
Thank you for
architecture?
calling me young man.
You are
You are young, man.
You're very young.
So I'm concerned about all the parking inlets from Broadway, and I understand that it's for parking under the building, and I appreciate that. I think even the city, you know, was, the packet, I recall, that one of the advisements was to not have so much,
Sure.
to have less egress and entrance options. Have you guys really looked at that, and can you still have the parking underneath the building? Because I certainly, you know, value keeping that. The safety concern is there for me, people parking underground, but otherwise I think it certainly makes sense to not have it be accessible and viewable and all of those things. Parking is
Yeah.
just not the prettiest thing to look at.
Yeah, that was definitely on our radar when we were laying the building out and trying to reconcile, you know, what's the best interest of the resident, the best interest of the community, the best interest of the pedestrian, you know, what's the best line of sight. The plan that we have arrived at, again, in part driven by the topography, does terrace down. And so that created some circulation challenges relative to accessing that tuck under parking, because at the end of the day, what's called a hammerhead, which is basically a dead end road that you have to hit it, and if you found someone's parking in your parking space, you got a 3-point turn and get back. Doesn't work so well. So the only other alternative is the fence that, you know, goes up, or a gate or something like that. Again, we're not, you know, we might be leading with our chin, but we have a high level of confidence that, you know, this project will attract the type of resident and create an environment that doesn't have to make excuses for itself, you know, relative to security over a long period of time. Maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to that as we kind of get there, but having access directly to your unit with the kids in the car, I've got 2 little kids, it's crazy. With the kids in the car, not waiting for someone on that shared alley to back in or out of their parking space or empty out the trunk, trash enclosure. We wanted to give folks at least 2 ways of getting home. And we're kind of a believer that convenience matters to folks, and even though, and there's no right answer here, this is just opinion, even though we feel it's advantageous that the project be perceived and function as one, there's also something to be said to driving your front door or driving to your staircase quickly and with convenience that gives you a sense of, I live in this building versus that building. So the idea of being able to get people home to, you know, not fence the project and announce that there's a concern about security. These are all things that actually inform the 3 easternmost drives with each of these blocks, and then just the functionality of not having to do a 3-point turn at the end of the alleyway. We always try and stay as far away from dead-end circulation patterns as possible, just because they don't work very well.
It's a safety thing too.
What's that?
It's a safety thing too.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the 3 there. The one on the corner is a little easier to explain. It's just convenience. You know, this is going to be a challenge to lease from a perspective of attracting a tenant, retail tenant to that area that can justify new construction and the rent costs that go along with that. And so there we've given customers 2 ways to get in to whatever service or retail operation, is up in that corner. The one thing that we have studied, at the suggestion of the city, because of concerns about bike and pedestrian traffic up and down Broadway, which we understand does want to be essentially a pedestrian corridor, is how do we score relative to what's there? If someone's at the bottom of Broadway in West Broadway Village choosing, am I willing to walk up this street, or do I need to use some other mode of transportation? What is the thought process in general that they're confronting? Well, when you look at it, every block, with each block being basically a 700-yard span, all the way beyond not just the next block above us, but several further, actually has 5 or more curb cuts on both sides of the street. And so the thought process
Those
here.
are mostly homes, yeah? Or are they?
No,
It's like a mix.
it's kind of a mix. The thought process, the thought process here is that perhaps folks are deciding before they take the walk whether or not the span that they're going to be walking, whether it's a block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, or all the way up to East Salinas, or East, not Salinas, East Seaside. Is it Seaside East or East Seaside? Seaside East, yeah. Is comfortable, and I think that you're probably good there. There aren't a lot of curb cuts relative to other parts of the city, but even as you get, we're super close to West Broadway, and I think we'll benefit from all the things you guys are doing. As you go further up, obviously you've got both curb cuts and streets. And it's the streets with the pass-through traffic that are going to create, much more volume than, as I've highlighted, those few folks that might be going home to their own unit, because there's, unlike a bigger project where we've got a throat where everybody goes through it, we're giving residents multiple choices on how to get back, and then making the alleyway as attractive as a solution as possible by widening it quite a bit and committing a significant amount of landscaping, so that alleyway really feels like a nice main entrance, even though it's not on the primary street.
This is very informational, so I didn't realize that there were that many. You're lower than the rest at the end of the day. 5 and you guys have 4, so thank you for that.
They probably have more density there as well.
Right, yeah.
So, even though they may have 4.
Yeah. It will definitely impact traffic.
Especially if you're trying to take a left turn.
And I'm worried about the bike lane. From somebody who lives on Upper Broadway, I'm all the way at the top of the hill. And the bike lanes, I really encourage you, I encourage the city to do more signage, because it's just way too easy to turn and not look, and bikes go down that hill really fast. So when we had the temporary bike lane there, I was amazed we didn't have something more devastating, which I'm grateful for. But
Yeah.
it was, as a driver, I had to reframe, oh wait, I've gotta look, periphery and make sure I'm cleared. Mixed use, I understand the focus on housing and everything, but there's also a focus on living and, shops and things like that. And even you talk about people with groceries or something like that at Trader Joe's, or, some sort of small, grocery store, market or something like that down there. Was there a reason you didn't do more commercial in the building?
Yeah, not to be flip, but the reason was Seaside City Center, which, was beautiful, but took us 3.5 years to lease. We recognize that, as a catalyst project that's first, we're going to be carrying the torch, and the rents that characterize either side of the street are probably about half what we're going to need to charge for this new facility, and there just aren't going to be that many takers, and there aren't gonna be that many types of businesses that in a more neighborhood-oriented location, whereas now Seaside City Center is super commercial and very successful.
That took a long time.
The volumes that the tenants would need to do, or the business types that can support the costs associated with new development are going, there aren't going to be as many possible solutions that won't just go out of business. They're just the practical application of trying to want to realize, finish, lease up this project and have it be completely successful versus mostly successful. You've seen our project in Sand City. We have busted our hump to try and fill the bottom of the Independent, and even though we've got a great bar there that's super popular, it is extremely difficult to get people to lease a mid-block location, and even at a rent structure that's substantially less than what we'll need to charge here, because we got other sources of income. So there's a little bit of apprehension on taking too many chances with the commercial uses. Yeah.
Okay. It's just the look and feel that I'm kind of trying to understand a little bit. And
Totally.
certainly understand the need for housing overall. Love the pavers. I think that, on so many levels, as we talk about the water and, just being able to soak into the ground as well as just the look and feel. I think it really does change. It doesn't have that, what is it, that commercial? I mean, it just changes the feel, the vibe. So, thank you for that. The overhangs of the balcony, I'm concerned about on the Broadway side. Are they how far, are they close to the sidewalk, or how far out do they
I
go?
don't think
And
any
I'm
of
just
them
kinda-
overhang the sidewalk at all.
Okay.
They're all interior to the sidewalk, and I think there's kind of a pocket. Matt, is there a
Yeah.
pocket for those units? Yeah.
So are they, what are they, like 5, are they like 8 feet? Can you?
7 to 8 feet.
7 to 8?
7 to 8 feet from the outside plane of the wall, or 7 to 8 feet total? No.
No total, but they're set back into the building.
So
Yeah, so
you're
they
not just
probably
standing
only-
up and going out.
Yeah,
You've
there's
got a little
not gonna be
room.
any water balloons hitting people in the head. Yeah. There's,
But you got a little room too.
Yeah.
I worry about that. Sometimes you get
Oh my
like
gosh.
this.
Yeah,
1 foot. Oh, you've got this lovely patio.
the patios at the Independent are awful. I mean, you could put like a little, baby-sized chair and, lean over the edge, but you're not gonna hang out on those balconies. These you'll actually use.
Be able to.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the balconies facing, to answer your question, facing Broadway, you can see how they're stepped back into the.
Okay, into the.
It's the ends that are facing
Uh,
Broadway. not
yeah,
the-
yeah,
there
yeah,
you go.
that's right, there you go. So they might project, I don't know, if that's 7 or 8 feet total, that's
2 feet.
2-3 feet, something like that, yeah. But it's all within the landscaping buffer.
Okay. It looked from the things when I looked at it. Not a problem. Rooftop deck I have. I think, obviously even if you just had one or that type of thing for a party area or for, for the whole use.
Yeah.
And I assume you have views there. I would be surprised when you're 3 feet up and if you don't. I think those are my questions. I don't care for the wood as much. I understand maybe it's to hide a bit more. I prefer the metal railings on the balcony, but that's a personal thing.
Yeah, I actually like
I do, and see that's, yeah. And, I know, storage for stuff, I mean, even bikes or things like that for people, is there any of that in the garage space, or
I
you
think
guys
we- I
are you
think
gonna have a
we'll-
little something?
Yeah, there isn't a, explicit area that is set aside for, people's extra stuff.
Not a lot.
So you might wanna invest in the nearest mini storage unit.
Where we put it?
But,
So even a bike or things
so
like that?
the balconies are wide enough to store their bikes. We do have, reasonably good size for apartments, walk-in closets.
You're
And
gonna bring your
then,
bike up 3 stories?
We We actually do have bike
This-
racks at each
Just
building.
down below, there's.
Yeah.
Oh, we do have-
We have common area bike racks.
Outside or
Outside. It's a, well, it's
inside?
an enclosed bike
Covered.
locker, if you will.
Oh,
Okay, okay, they are.
Yeah.
There,
Okay.
there we
I
go.
think I was thinking bikes,
Yeah,
definitely.
so we,
All right. I'll let others, thank you.
Thank you.
No? No? Do you have anything else? No? Okay. Let's see, so the commercial building, can you, I was just surprised that the entrance was not right on Broadway and around the corner, down the side of the road, so what did you want, street presence?
Yeah, I mean, it's, a lot of it was dictated by which tenant, takes the space.
It's one tenant, correct, or can you split it?
It could be split, but it's really set up for a single tenant. Yeah, it's set up for a single tenant. The challenge you were talking about is definitely something that I'm intimately familiar with, because we really wrestled with it on Lower Broadway, trying to take a project where the parking for convenience was on the interior, but create, a streetscape that encouraged, pedestrian presence and had, presence to the street. So this I know for sure it will orient to the street aesthetically. I don't yet know, depending upon the use, whether that, if there's a door there, that the door will be the front door or the back door. And some of the considerations that come into this would be, if it ends up being some form of, dining establishment, typically you need dining establishment, away from where people enter, because people won't park close to the front door, get in and get out. One, possible type of use on the corner could be, what's considered kind of medical retail, wherein the use might take advantage of the windows. What we'll do our level best to avoid is that those windows are actually just a wall. And that's the biggest challenge, because, in a normal shopping context, you basically have a front door with windows and then a bowling alley and a black wall, and it's easy to build out those spaces, and so most of the tenants are kind of accustomed to that. That's what you see on the other side of Broadway. I love the Polleria across the street. My buddy owns it.
What's his name?
What's that?
What's his name?
His name.
I know him already, I've known him since a kid, I'm just making fun, funny.
He worked for me for 2 years. What's his name? Starts with a D. It starts with a D, doesn't it?
Think of
I'm
his
very,
dad.
very visual. Yeah. I got it in my phone.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah. What's his name? I'll remember it in a minute. But that, the point really there is that when we go to lunch there, typically we're parking a couple parking spaces down the street. It's less convenient than being able to drive in, park in front of Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that. So it's really just kind of a convenience. I remember that. It drove me crazy.
Tonight, 2 o'clock in the morning.
I'll remember to sit down and check my phone. Yeah. But,
Alright, so it might just be a passerby and more, I guess everything is just so auto-centric.
Has to be, right, with the.
Have you given any thought to any sustainable aspects to this project?
I mean, Cal Green kind of holds us to that standard. Your governor is doing a darn good job of making sure that that is required. So yes. Lots
So,
of them.
are
And
we doing anything special or just adhering to code? Like
to
rainwater
adhering-
catchment,
Mm.
to water the plant, I mean, are you
Some-
storing?
Yeah.
No, we're not doing the storing of that, but we did materials like the pavers to, recharge, the soil.
So there's some permeability with the pavers?
That's correct, right? And we're also going 100% electric on this project. There will be no gas.
Okay.
And that also
Okay.
applies to achieve and beyond Cal Green standard.
Okay.
Roofs will have, solar prep,
Solar?
so that we can have that option
Mhm.
as well.
That's
So,
good.
and that was one of the other reasons why we were balancing the roof decks.
Yeah.
Is cause we're like, okay, how do you have these conflicts, you have a roof deck, which creates occupant load issues also for exiting, but then also
Mhm.
conflicts with the solar issue,
Mhm.
so that's
Yeah.
what we're kind of balancing.
And then the trash enclosures to, have,
They fully, compost, recycle, and trash.
okay,
Wow.
That's pretty
It's
good.
coming.
That's the first
It's
time I've heard
coming.
that.
Yeah,
That's
compost,
really
compost is
good.
nice.
Compost is coming back.
So the only other safety piece I had was the tandem parking.
Yeah.
And you have bike parking tucked way back there as well.
So the tandem parking we looked at is basically a bonus. We had this building laid out where the foundation stopped at the first parking space.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, guys, if we're gonna build a retaining wall, can we just build it 20 feet further over and pick up more parking? So if someone wants to have another car that maybe they don't use as much, and, obviously the tandem parking will be committed such that it's the same person or the same family. You're not gonna have two different people jockeying for position.
Designating parking.
Yeah, but that was a kind of an afterthought that, hey, wait, we can pick up another, 12 parking spaces, so let's do that.
Right, cause you have a lot of headspace in the stall and it just is this no man's zone.
That might be where we put those lockers.
Storage.
Yeah, that might be
That's
where we
what I
put
was
those
thinking.
lockers, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, typical, or at least upper, you park underneath.
And where the tandem occurs, that's the building that has the 3-bedroom units, the
Right.
larger units, so that probably makes more sense
Right.
to assign it to those
Storage.
units.
So it is tandem parking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for those, just, that's the bigger unit, or the bigger building.
Unit 6,
Uh,
parcel 6?
Right, right.
Yeah,
One,
the one on Olympia?
Yeah, parcels,
Is
The
what
one
is it?
right in,
building C.
Building C. And
Yeah.
again,
Parcel 6.
you didn't ask about it, but in case it comes up later, the strategy on that building is that, the residents of the top floor will park on the uphill side so that nobody has to climb more than 2 flights of stairs. And that topography change is something we took advantage of. The other observation, because I think it needs to be voiced, is that the most boring elevation is screened by the most attractive building on the street. So the bottom elevation is actually only about the width of a 30-foot setback from the condos that are envisioned, not condos, I'm sorry, the townhouses. Go back. There you go. Okay, yeah, perfect. The townhouses are envisioned as basically the primo units. Each of those are 7 individual 2-story units with their own parking underneath. And so conceptually, if this were, a project that was rented, say, by, employees of community hospital who are going to Ryan Ranch to work at the new Montage campus, you might have, the young residents or the, professionals that are in town, looking for housing, living with, young families in these 2-story units. And then the rest of the project is populated by, a variety of different families. We've got 3-bedroom units in the larger of the building in order to create some variability. And then, good mix of the 1- and 2-bedroom units with an emphasis on the 2-bedroom unit because those are the ones that seem to be in greatest demand.
and there's no balconies on that facade that look towards the townhouses?
There are, the center, units, go back. Do you have the,
You need a floor plan or?
can you go back to
Oh,
the
there,
elevation?
yeah, this, okay.
Yeah,
It doesn't-
go back one,
this
there
is
you
the
go.
parking.
So, yeah, they're,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
they're
There's
basically at each,
some of it, okay.
yeah, there's some,
Wow, quite a project.
I drove it on my way down, what a change for that neighborhood. I think parking will still be a challenge for that whole area, but it's tight.
I think it's been really well.
Should we go on?
Lucky number 33.
yeah.
You just have to do it. Alright, we can continue on. Or we can, you wanna take, landscaping or lighting and, or,
So, we do have a fifth Wednesday that's open, so we have an open meeting date for the continuance to wrap it up in a timely manner. So we have the ability to have that meeting on October 30th.
okay.
That would be the fifth Wednesday, that would not interrupt any of the other meetings.
meetings that are here.
Or, because this is an item that would probably take you additional time in formulating your findings and recommendations that would then be forwarded on to the use permit process through the zoning administrator.
Great. So from what has been discussed, it has to be compiled.
Yeah, you would have a recommendation that we would have written that would be attachment to the staff report.
Okay.
So that would be an official recommendation that the board has comments on that should be looked at or analyzed in terms of in its review of the use permit, what's pertinent from a design standpoint, and consistency with the municipal code.
Okay.
May I ask, is there a reason why we want to continue, just because it's late, or?
I mean,
I respect your schedule, so if you.
How long does the board want to be here this evening? That would be your decision. We don't normally have meetings that are this long, but it's at the board's discretion in terms of how long we want to continue and go through the remainder of the project and how you want to formulate your findings and recommendations that we would bring back in a written format.
Right, so we have the option of, there's another Wednesday in this month that's open, so we could, if we, it's 7:30, we have to get through the landscaping piece and the lighting piece, and then, like Rick said, formulate all of the comments so they can package it and give it to the applicant. So, what we just went over would have to get, we'll have to get compiled and then go, so I don't know if we should stop and have what we have, what we just discussed.
So far, I think I read
So far, I like everything too.
on what's been presented so far, but I have roughly another 40 minutes that I can spend here tonight.
I got about 15, maybe with my daughter.
Okay, so,
The 30th right now, I've got a conflict, but I can potentially, right now I've got something scheduled if we do that. I'm okay, I can stay tonight, and I prefer that.
It'd be nice if we could get through it tonight.
Yeah.
Spend like tonight.
But how much longer do you think it'll?
I don't know, we have to present the lighting piece
Right
and
Four more pages.
the lighting.
Just long to it?
I don't have anything more to say about landscaping.
Okay. Well, staff,
I'm just gonna get water, I'll be right back.
I'm just gonna send a text and I'll just say.
We'll still have
Yeah.
Keith, if you need to leave, Keith.
No, I already sent a text.
Okay.
Alright,
And I can.
so following on.
How long do you have?
So continuing on with landscaping, what you're looking at is the color, coverage, location, size, texture, type of plant materials, provisions for irrigation, maintenance, protection of landscape areas and other elements, and also that the AR shall encourage planting of native and drought tolerant landscaping. So the landscape plan is shown here, the spaces that have already been talked about, in between most of the multifamily buildings here. Contain a lot of tree plantings and other grasses, which we'll skip forward to in the next few slides. You can see their entire planting palette. Maybe not be able to read the names of the species, but there are calcs that they provided, based on their being drought tolerant and low water usage. Here's some of the details we did look at earlier, these nooks, although in this project and with the density bonus being given, there are also opportunities for the applicant to request exceptions to the zoning code, and it is very likely that the common open space area required for the number of units on a parcel with 2 of type A buildings is not meeting the area required. So there will be some things that you might not have comments on, but from a zoning perspective, some of those project elements could be potentially modified or waived depending on how many exceptions need to be granted for this project. Here's some of the, these are mostly the tree palette that they're proposing. And looking at how the plans did or didn't comply with the tree planting, and again, we're at an early design phase in which minor corrections can be made to comply with the code. I believe the tree plantings on Broadway were under code by maybe 50–40%. So minor edits to some things, major exceptions to others. Modifications will definitely be part of what we see through in the final version coming back to you, depending on how the ZA hearing goes and the density bonus process goes.
Could I ask you a quick question about trees, the
Sure.
landscaping on the plat? With those, you mentioned trees being in front of the windows, is that true? Like, there's gonna be tree, is that gonna be like, is that, uniform, all the same trees?
From the planting plan that was
Yes.
provided for the areas in between the buildings where they do have those shared spaces, which are these 3,
Yes.
it differs on the ends. I believe so, that this planting, just the specifications are the same. So that rhythm and repetition
That's
is
repetition. Thank you.
indicated. So continuing on, more of the ground covers and succulents and grasses. And some screening elements as well, which like the podocarpus is going to be, I believe, and the ficus around the garbage enclosures. Then they provided calcs for water efficiency, which weren't looked at in detail by staff, but the landscape plans for these projects are reviewed outside of the city for compliance. So the fact that this exists here is a good first step towards reaching compliance with that. And that's it for landscaping. And I believe you said you wanted to do lighting at the same time, so we can jump into that. I think most of your questions were answered during the kind of safety Q&A session that you had. But we can plug through real
Yeah.
quick. So they're proposing around 6 different fixtures for the exterior, varying from parking under the carports to parking being placed on buildings and for those illuminating the, parking areas. We won't call it parking lot, we should call it that. I did one section that kind of, has every fixture represented in it, so we can see the accessible pathway has a certain type of lighting fixture, the corridors and the hallway has its own parking area is different, and then these exterior ones off the building providing illumination to hopefully enhance the parking area's safety are included. And there's just a handful of fixture specifications, which I don't think we need to plug through all of these, but connect the dots between those pages and make sense of it as you can. And I believe that's it, lighting, landscaping, and architecture.
Alright.
Be very brief on the lighting plan. I'll just go back. What we did was we purposely looked at very specific fixtures for each kind of condition. For example, along the pedestrian path area, we used low bollard lights fixtures there. Along the alleyway, we used pole gold wing style. Those are only though 14 feet in height. Our goal is to kind of make sure we light the parking lot, but not have any light pollution to the adjacent apartments next door.
What's the expansion of the lighting of each light? How far, how many feet?
What the photometric is a little cut off here, but it goes all the way to about the curb line
So
of the
lights.
driveway, yeah, so we have sufficient
Covers the
foot
drive.
candles, correct.
Thanks.
We have a decorative, what I call kind of the jewelry lights, the wall mounted sconces along the front of the building. We have more of a utilitarian light fixture LED at the parking, tucked under parking. We have wall packs that are light up the auto courtyard. And we have another decorative surface mounted ceiling light fixture that lights up the pedestrian path. Gives it and also provides a nice accent and kind of reinforces the queue of the pedestrian area in those areas. So that's the extent of our site lighting fixtures.
Nice lighting.
Yeah.
So the accent ones on the front for the ends, what are they?
Those are wall
I
sconces.
know, but what are they,
So-
signage or?
No, they're
just-
cylinder downlights to
Yeah.
kind of just light the down
Okay, so
downlights.
they're just down,
Down-
cause they
downlights.
look like they can be aimed or something.
No, they do have the function, but because of light pollution, we just have them straight
Oh, okay.
down lights.
So it's,
They
I was
have the-
wondering if you were going to like try and shoot down to accent where that passageway was, you know, or, but they're just on the wall.
They're adjustable, they can be covered
Hi,
to where you
that-
can cover
that
your
makes
light.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, but I, you know,
Yeah.
I would like to think that, especially at night, I mean,
What they
you
cover,
wanna accentuate where that, I guess you'll see the wall,
Yeah, I mean, we're
You'll see
talking,
it coming
I mean, some of the, we're 1, 2, almost 3 foot candles in that
That's a lot of
pedestrian
light.
path.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't wanna say it, that's automall.
Oh, no.
I mean,
it's like a prison, it's lit up like a
it's
prison.
really,
Oh,
but it's
no.
warm, we're using 300, we're using 300 lumens, so we're not
Yeah.
using, or excuse me, 4,000 lumens.
Yeah.
So we're not using the cold blue, it's a warm light.
It makes a big difference.
I think the lighting
Still
is
gonna
great.
pass that.
Yes.
Is it on both sides of the building, front,
Yes.
on Broadway?
Yes.
I like
Right.
that they're flexible, so you
Yeah.
can work with them.
Okay, so it would
Yeah,
be,
so goes around the
this
building.
is some are poles and some are on the building.
Yes.
I like the building lights.
The ones in the alley are the poles.
Yes, that's the only one that we have on a pole, is just because of that parking area.
Yeah.
Everyone else, we like surface or on the walls.
Those are,
Yeah.
what are those on the left? That's
Like
not,
right here?
no, on the left.
This?
Yeah, that's not a pole?
That's a pole, but this is the,
it's
mixed use,
commercial,
that's the
yeah.
mixed use
That's
building, so that's
yes.
why it's on a pole.
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then you have stuff at the bar.
Correct, the trash enclosure is on the underside of the
Yeah,
roof
lights
deck.
there.
That would be operated by a motion sensor, so it's
Oh.
not on all the time. And that's-
Are all of these going to have some way of dimming or on motion sensors? if
Correct, they would be
there's-
on photocell,
Yeah.
and then they would also be the
Like-
50%.
Yeah, so they do that?
Yeah, the
Oh, good.
Okay, in here somewhere. There was a lighting plan that had some areas in shadow, and I didn't understand why they were designated that way. Like, why was all this stuff shaded?
Sorry, come up here.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's asphalt pavement, the white areas are, sorry, the electrical engineer just did the layer
Okay.
issue, yeah, so this is all pavers, this
Okay.
is asphalt pavement,
Alright,
so
I was
they
just like,
it's a layer issue, they
That's
just
what the
didn't turn off.
talking about.
Yeah, sorry.
it's like,
We'll
I could
fix
see
that.
the numbers underneath it, it
Yeah,
wasn't like it was
no,
low at a
it's-
lower level or anything of the sort.
Yeah,
Yeah, so in the area that is, between the trash enclosures on the upper, towards, on the north side,
Yeah. Hello?
No, sorry,
Let's see.
what happens there?
it's a big light.
You're talking about everything that happens along the alleyway,
Left, no, go to the up north,
up north,
yeah,
let's see,
did you,
we have a photometric plan,
maybe you can just tell me.
yeah.
So what happens right here is just a nothing zone.
Oh, that's a landscape area, so.
There's no lights.
There's no lights,
So
right now it's just kind of grass and turf area,
Maybe some.
we can certainly add if it
I
feels
mean,
appropriate.
Maybe some
Yeah.
of the, fixtures
Good
that
point.
he'll be
Yeah.
putting in the other landscape
Yeah.
areas.
or another one on the wall here or something that
Yeah.
just shed sunlight.
I think some nice decorative wall packs in that area would definitely
Just
provide.
Yeah,
Mhm.
cause I mean, if you're going to here and there's nothing coming off the building, going to the garbage,
Agree.
and it's on a sensor,
Sensor may not work sometimes.
and then along this street, there's, nothing as well.
Oh, on our lighting plan, we did not show the off-site, street lights. But we will be working with Public Works on all the new
Okay.
street pole lights that would be along Broadway, all four streets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about at the entrances to these townhouses, are you gonna have
They have,
recessed
soffit light
cans coming down?
over their, yeah, over their
Okay,
cabins.
so there is
Correct.
lighting there, it's just not, okay. Alright.
And just circling back on the landscape
Yeah.
plan, a really good project to maybe reference is we just completed 2020 Del Monte, by the, postgraduate school, that's where the new Starbucks is. But that's kind of the quality and level of landscaping, and the kind of some of the, drought tolerant plants that we've used there. And it kind of demonstrates the variety of trees, that we've got.
I like that building.
Yeah, and we worked with,
Yeah, this is
Mr.
so-
Maury, on some of those, plans, he's kind of done a lot of our design builds, so.
Okay, the only one I have, some concern of is that artesia. Cause, you know, people with allergies, it just drives them crazy.
Oh, the yellow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
And that's 1 out of 10.
that, other than that.
The strawberry
Can't do something about it for
high
one
maintenance.
person.
So, how big does a dragon tree get? I didn't realize that was a tree.
Those grow real slow.
They go it takes, they
That's
go
a
up to
succulent.
about 5, 6 feet, not even that.
That's it?
Depending on the water.
That thing's probably 20 years old, don't you think?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really old
Huh.
plant.
Yeah.
It's probably about 35 years old.
And it's
Yeah.
5-6 feet?
That one there, I don't know.
No, would you, do we have some around our area?
No, but I've seen them, I've
Yeah.
seen them
It's like a
around. They
signal.
don't
Over
go that
here?
far.
Yeah,
Where?
like a
I
single
haven't
wall,
seen
they
it
just
around
never
here.
really
Oh,
grow.
that's why I was wondering.
But I'm in PG, so.
They're more like, they look like agaves.
Yeah, they look like yabi,
Yeah,
they look like yucca.
Yeah,
I
kind of
just-
in between your agaves and.
Yabi, yeah.
Right, I
And
just,
not just
I was wondering
round.
They're nice trees.
how if it was gonna survive, cause I don't, I just wanted to.
Self-retained, it
Uh-huh.
sucks in some water. Yeah, sucks the water out of the ground.
So we're gonna see another design at
something, right? We're just looking at colors or the plants?
So
or-
where are the planter pots
Located.
on the South Dragon Tree?
Yeah, I don't. The intention was that I'm looking to see if I have a close-up of, but they would be around the commercial building storefront areas.
Yes.
I don't, sorry, I don't have a detail of that plan area, but that's the intention of that.
And bike racks?
It's great, man.
Bike racks would be, there's one outside of the commercial retail building, then we have bike racks at each, and bike closets at each of the residential buildings.
The bench seating?
The bench seating occurs, that's in the common,
Oh, is that in that little sculpture?
Courtyard
But I
area?
thought that was like a built-in, is it a movable thing?
no, it's actually, built in on the, when the building steps,
Oh,
the
it's a
built-in is,
built-in, if it's
cause what we're
sunk in.
doing is we're concealing the retaining wall to
Yeah.
kind of double as that built-in seat, so that retaining wall acts as your backrest.
Seat,
Right,
yeah, it's a
but
backrest.
if it's on grade, then you have a bench?
Bench, correct,
Oh,
yeah.
I see, okay.
And that's enclosed? Or that's?
It's open, they have either the retaining wall or it's open, but it's not fully covered, it's open to the air. That's a good plan here. So this one would be higher, and then this one is the lower one, so you can kind of see the gray retaining wall with the built-in bench.
Yeah.
And then this is the commercial area, so you can kind of see some of the areas for the planter boxes that would be along that storefront area.
Okay, and is that the trash enclosure right there?
Trash enclosure is correct, right
It's
here.
right there.
Yeah.
Pretty close. Right by the parking.
And that's the part of our planning is using the ficus and others to soften that, and then also with the roof to conceal it, so that it's not a unsightly, view from the upper units.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Does it have to be done?
Kind of looking at our site plan, what we've strategically done is kind of done one trash enclosure for every building. And we've
Well,
tried-
every two.
Yeah, but we kind of cluster them, and we kind of consider this one building, or one parcel, I guess,
Partial.
yeah. So,
And then now.
and then this building has this
I
one
think
here.
it's a
and this
great,
one.
I think it looks really nice. Well put together. Put my name on it.
Yeah, and again, locating them, it made sense to put it on the alley side, so it's less visible, it's not,
Mhm.
It's easier for the garbage
Garbage,
truck to
yeah,
come and
correct.
scoop it right up, not being on the main street. So,
Okay. All right, anything else? All right, thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Put together our, comments.
This was well done, well thought out.
No other, anything to add architectural wise? We talked about, density, access points from the driveway, which was, they came back with this. Talked about, the entries, yeah.
Lighting on it.
Lighting.
Lighting, the signs, the trees,
Plants.
the exposure of the bicycles, the bikes, the city for the fire, where they can sit.
Did you say they're short on trees on side by side?
We actually revised the landscape plan we submitted to you and now achieved the city required 25 streets.
Sure, we'll verify that.
It's far as, number of units that are accessible and
Accessible.
parking, that was his.
Or-
Correct, yeah.
So,
Yeah, one thing we didn't touch upon, but we do provide EV parking stalls as well,
Oh,
that those
that's
labeled
cool.
on the plans. Right, and we do achieve the minimum accessible parking stalls per the code, and then the number of units have to be also per, chapter 11.
Boy, it sounds like Burlingame and in the city area where you're doing this thing here.
yeah.
Really modern, really neat, clean.
Yeah.
It's right in. Like,
So, I still have the concerns about the entries, in the middle and not seeing where it exists. Like, there's no clear indication where you get to your front door. Especially, you know, I don't disagree, I like the covered parking aspect, it's just the safety aspect of if you're walking or whatever, unless you know where you're going. Of how do you know where the units are and how to get to them?
make brochures and pamphlets.
Maybe
With maps.
wayfinding signage could accommodate, could help with something like that.
Right? I mean, you'll have, I'm assuming you'll either have addresses on the buildings, so you know how to get to whatever, but from there, it's like you're driving in and, I mean, like anything else, the first time is like,
Sure.
you're trying to find something, and, you know, everything's accessible except the upper floors, so knowing that you have to get to the middle, I mean, that part,
Yeah, I mean, you could do something with signage or some creative, directional, cues, things like that.
right.
But it's a good suggestion.
So, and then we talked about the lighting in the specific areas that we're not, I mean, the paving part is good, as far as using pavers in that alleyway especially. And, I'm also not keen on so many, entrances and stuff off of Broadway, but I also see the point about the turnarounds. It was just, if you didn't have that, access onto Broadway, I can see an outdoor space that could be used by everyone. I think that's another part that is another concern, is the ground level outdoor use spaces. That's pretty minimal what we provided. And I don't think that would be sufficient enough for the amount of people and residents that you have here. What else did we discuss? We looked at the tandem parking and the safety aspect of the pieces way behind, so perhaps that could be a storage or something in that area.
We didn't really talk about materials.
No, we did not, you're correct, and colors, and,
Why didn't I just do this continue? Because I thought we were covering
have
three
it there.
things, we were covering three things, now we got 6 or 7 things that we're gonna go back into, so I don't have to make a decision if it's continuous or something, because now there's other issues coming up that we're gonna address in the first. We were gonna discuss 3 things, and now we're discussing 5 or 6 things.
Material
And I
related,
should have.
the wood,
yeah.
No, I just wanted to know, I did a decision on something because of what we were gonna base our
Yeah.
judgment of what we were going to do, and now we're doing
Yeah.
other things, and now
But we
I'm
discussed the
concerned.
color a little bit, and, I mean, I just think
What
it's
about that now?
about what?
Going into other things now that we were going to discuss before, and I think coloring, so maybe we should.
The color kind of reminds me of like, I think it's the 50s or the 70s and avocado.
Can you
yellow.
Like
put the
military.
finishes, materials and colors?
That's
Not
why you
as
have that
modern,
on the
it's somewhat
ground.
classic.
It is neutral, I mean, it's got the earthy colors,
But it's not much, it's just enough accent, feel to give the building personality, so
I like it. It's
kind
gonna
of a
drive the
modern
city.
retro.
Yeah.
So the composite wood siding piece that is the top one with the slats more like the fencing, composite meaning
So
what?
we've used a number of products. We've actually used a Hardy panel before. We've actually used Dex. We've used Hardy is another one. I forget the other people that make the plank. It's a composite.
We have a wood look.
Trex, yeah, I'm sorry,
Trex.
Trex, and we just
Okay.
actually used that
Trex.
at 2020 Del Monte and applied that Trex decking vertically on a building, and it's fantastic and very durable. And it has a very synthetic wood grain pattern to it,
Mhm.
and its durability and maintenance wise is fantastic. It's a great product, especially for our climate.
Great, great.
Coastal
That's why I
area.
just want to make
Yeah.
sure that it
Yeah.
was that type.
We were not proposing real cedar or wood. I
Yeah.
think that's gonna weather too quick and.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so those are for the trash and the balconies?
And then also in the building, we have proposed some cement fiberboard and the composite, wood siding materials in the accent areas.
For design.
Yeah, accent, yeah, pumps.
I don't care for the windows personally, the third picture. To me, that looks like a jail, where they've got the windows sticking out. And maybe it's just not having the context of how it looks.
That element there,
Do you
Yeah.
have that element on your design?
there's a couple of windows that what it is it's an aluminum frame, if you will, that just is a standoff and it creates a shadow line is really what it is there, but.
Can you point it out as to where it exists? Is it all, it's
so-
just that building?
So right here, for example,
Mhm.
there's that, it's a long,
Oh.
it kind of emphasizes the the verticality of that element, and it's at the stair element, so it just kind of emphasizes that.
The elongated.
Yeah.
But that's different, so is it in all of the windows?
No,
or
no, it's
that
just
one?
at very select areas where we're trying to create, kind of emphasize
Yeah.
an architectural element. It's-
Yeah, and it's the aluminum, so it's just a frame, so that there's no, and it's, yeah, so the maintenance wise is.
Correct,
is
it's
cool.
aluminum,
Yeah.
pre-finished, yeah.
That's how you guys have a lot
That
of
doesn't
work.
look like a jail to me.
No, yeah,
It's very much a
It's hard to
context
get
thing.
those concept images and then you
Yeah.
apply it to here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Um, go ahead.
and so the wood, the wood deck is only on the interior pieces, I mean, the balcony kind of things? And you're not gonna have, is your intention to have the metal to hold up the edge kind of thing? That's,
We'd have steel posts at the
Yeah.
end and then use cable wire, for the horizontal, that'd be 4 inches on
Like
center.
design.
well, this one, the metal has that attachment that kind of holds the.
Oh,
holds
no,
that.
we would not have that,
Okay,
we
you're
would
not
have,
gonna have that.
it would be an
I don't
integrated
care for that.
structure, it would be more,
We're having the middle
That-
ones.
and we would not have exposed,
Yeah, I
floor
didn't-
rafters either, we would have a solid
Yeah.
bottom as well.
Mhm.
We wouldn't have exposed rafters like that.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
but definitely, we don't have this,
Okay, yeah.
that
yeah.
element here, that's a little too industrial.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was more intent trying to capture the essence of the siding.
Which gives more privacy.
Yeah.
And so the other part that I'm not too keen on the landscaping that I see in the 3D view of the alley with, and I don't know if it's just occurring on the ends at the alley entrances, is that
The
sort of
fencing?
little fancy?
Yeah, I didn't care
Yeah.
for this, I mean, I think
And-
that could definitely
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, that could be improved upon.
Yeah, we're open to suggestions on that. We were just looking at trying to soften, again, that entry. We're open to, we can further study that. for you.
Plants versus,
I actually like that element because it does give it kind of a warmer.
I like it because it gives it, uniqueness, it's a style, and if they maintain it, it's good. If you put plants there, they're gonna die. In a year, they're gonna be kicking them, they're gonna be throwing
What's
stuff in.
protection for the plants that do survive?
It didn't,
Yeah.
I didn't see it anywhere else. I think in the design too.
No, yeah, we were just
Two for
trying
two, you got it.
to soften that alleyway. I think that's what we're doing. We can study that some more.
Yeah, I think without it, it would seem much more linear and.
It looks more open if you take that fence away.
I don't, something, it just does, it looks like you're in a corral.
Oh, no, man, that's pretty cool, actually.
You can do better than that.
Does it occur on the other end of the alley as well?
Yes. Those with the planners too.
And you want signage there, don't you? Maybe, as
In the alley?
No, I think
On the
right now the
sides.
only signage was just on the corner of Broadway and Terrace, that's.
So like what you had on that one rendering?
The one building.
That one?
Yes.
Correct, so I think.
That's it? That's just for the, is this for the project or is this for the
This would be
commercial?
just for the project, and then the tenant would have their
Okay, up
signage, and
there.
then we've also put Ascent
Uh-huh.
on the vertical corner there.
Okay.
Yeah, see, I like that, the base sign there.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that could be, yeah.
So
As
we
it
can
comes
take
into
that
the
element,
alleyway.
yeah.
For me, that's, yeah,
Or,
We do have
Again.
the curve,
the curve,
angle.
oh,
angle.
coming in, yeah.
kind of just.
But that could, yeah, this softens that corner and I'm sure they could work with it.
Mhm.
But it fits the feeling of, yeah, I don't know, that fence thing, the corral. So, I need a little, we're doing preliminary tonight?
This is concept, just giving,
Yeah.
just giving our
Feedback.
feedback.
Yeah, and I think there's been some valid points made here to help improve the design. It's an excellent design.
Beth, is there something else that we haven't covered? That you need more input in regards to the different components of each piece that you talked about?
I don't believe so, but your suggestions will be taken in, and made part of the ZA hearing, and whatever happens with the exceptions as well. Certain aspects of the project might change, but I think the signage is pretty clear, although we could have more specifications on those once it comes to final part, but yeah, I think we're good with what you provided so far as preliminary concerns, and you can provide comments. Incorporate those into your final design, and not too much shifts in one direction or another.
Okay. So, yes. Oh, no, I need to open it to the public.
Is there anybody left?
Is there
Anybody left?
anyone here that would like to comment on this?
That hasn't
Please
commented
step
so far,
forward.
you guys are
It's
out.
been waiting 3 hours.
Alright, seeing none, we'll close it to public comment, thank you. Okay, are we awake still? So, we don't have to vote on anything, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you guys
Thank you
for
very,
feedback.
very much.
There you go.
Exactly. The Italian stallion.
I got it.
The
huh?
thin Italian
You need it.
stallion.
Alright, continuing on, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can't leave yet. We have reports from board members. Item number 7. Do you have any reports? No?
No.
Seeing none, do we have reports from staff?
They did, they wouldn't tell us now. A little late.
Alright, then, let's, any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.